I was gonna say, I really hope that you weren't like the mop-up guy at that cinema.
No, I just leave it up, it just blends into the carpet.
Oh god, eventually.
Crunch, crunch, crunch.
We only come to dream. We only come to sleep.
What happened was...
It is not true. It is not true. That we come to live on earth.
원스! 이건 원스를 사람의 마음이야. 언제나 우리 함께 해줘서 고맙고 항상 초콜릿처럼 달달하게 친해졌고.
Oh man, it's episode 106, everybody, of Radio Free Innsmouth. And this week, we are going to be covering a band.
Oh my God!
I know, right? We never do that around here. But, yeah, we're talking about a band, but we're also talking about sort of an overall interesting way of looking at kind of the history of heavy metal and the development of the genre. It can be tempting to see it as sort of a linear progression from Black Sabbath to thrash metal and then into black metal and death metal. And that's sort of the end of it. Not entirely correct, and a lot of great metal has actually pushed the genre forward by jumping back in the timeline and then reintroducing old concepts, utilizing new techniques. I guess if you were really gonna get esoteric with it, it's sort of a conservative revolution in the Evelyn sense, where my man Julius down in Sicily talked about the conservative revolution as revolvere, the Latin term, revolvere. The root of revolution means you actually turn back to go forward. So you're going back with past concepts and traditions, and then with what you've learned in the time since then, updating those so that they work in a new era. If you're a metal band, you could take maybe sort of like a weird niche style from the 80s, such as this kind of weird stompy style that some bands were utilizing. Most notably Dokken, of course, but also mid-80s Ozzy Osbourne, specifically with Jakey Lee on like the Bark at the Moon album, where you just bend around inside bar chords a lot and have a very crunchy, electric, metallic guitar tone, and you do little arpeggios like that a lot. It's sort of an interesting style. Crimson Glory also kind of took that and then went into really progressive realms with it. But there was another band called Summerlands that went back to this style, but they were all dudes that had originally been in more death metal-y and black metal-y bands. They brought a new perspective to this old style of guitar playing, giving us a much more structurally complex take on the style. The vocals are de-emphasized in favor of the guitar riffs, which are considerably more complex, but still working inside that same sort of chugging, stomp-along milieu. Lots of palm mutes that aren't really thrashy, they're more just kind of like chugga-chugga-choo-choo train, you know. Layered, palm-muted melodies, very interesting style. Hey, are you, interested in possibly getting ready to rock?
Hi!
Oh, you're gonna dig this part then. How fucking cool was that? That weird little scale figure at the end of the riff. And then almost black metal bar chord right at the end there. Very good stuff. Highly recommend Summerlands. To find that, it's Summer and Lands all one word, but there's only one M in it. So that is not M. That is M.
원스!
I mean, this guy was a real jerk.
They take modern death metal and black metal compositional layering techniques and apply them to a more forgotten style of older metal to do some interesting new things with it. So moving forward by taking from the past and looking at it in a new way. The main band we're going to be covering this week, Crypt Sermon, are perhaps the greatest masters of doing that outside of maybe like Vector and Droid and all the wacky retro tech thrash bands. Their 2019 album has really been growing on me. It might in fact be my album of the year for that year. But Crypt Sermon, you can't really talk about them without talking about Candlemass, who were essentially the godfathers of what one might call non-stoner doom metal. Although I myself actually probably enjoyed quite a bit of certain substances whilst listening to Candlemass back in the prime of my degeneracy. In fact, one might say that what Candlemass were doing in the 80s is very similar to what bands like Summerlands and Crypt Sermon are doing now. Everybody else was pushing towards faster and faster thrash metal type stuff. Candlemass went back to Black Sabbath, but gave it a much more 80s technological mindset. They took out a lot of the more pentatonic and bluesy elements to the melodies and significantly hardened up the sound, but they concentrated on like this kind of slower tempo doom metal, and they actually invented the term doom metal with their first album, Epicus Doomicus Metallicus. And they had very operatic vocals, lots of vibrato, and they were lower pitched than a lot of the more shrieky Hellion vocalists of the time. More importantly, they were very big into a certain kind of melodic composition that went on to influence bands from outside the immediate sphere of even the doom metal stuff into black metal and death metal. There's some layers right there. This is Lars Johansson, who is very notable for his very narrative take to his solos. They each kind of feel like a little mini song of their own right. And then we get into some keyboards. This kind of layered melody, you have these very doomy chords and these astral keyboard melodies all over very reverbed the fuck out drums. That kind of stuff surprisingly even influenced bands like Morbid Angel, who specifically mentioned them as an influence on their peculiar way of doing melodies back in the 80s, as you can hear in this song off of the 1989 album Altars of Madness, Chapel of Ghouls. So you have all that kind of stuff bubbling around. Going into Crypt Sermon, who have been accused of being a Candlemass clone, but I think what they are doing is similar to what Candlemass did with Black Sabbath. They're going back to the ideas of bands like Candlemass, in addition to a lot of Dio and whatnot, but they're all guys from the death metal band Trench Rot, and actually their current bassist was in the thrash metal band Vector that I've talked about ad nauseum. So you have these very extreme metal guys going back to older 80s styles of metal, but with a lot of death metal and black metal ideas. For instance, y'all probably listen to At the Gates, you know, those kind of creepy crawly riffs they did on their first album, where they kind of took Slayer's way of doing layered melodies and just considerably made it more bendy and strange. Melodic layers sort of grading against each other in a very torturous fashion. That was a nice little scream from Tompa back there. How about that? Yeah, I know I'm like the one weirdo that enjoys the first two At the Gates albums the most out of their discography. It's fine. What happens when you take ideas like that and then apply them to old Candlemass style doom metal? How eerie is that? Absolute Candlemass style doom metal, but with a very spooky kind of death metal songwriting style applied to it. That's kind of in the vein of early At the Gates, maybe some of the old slower Morbid Angel bits. You just take that kind of songwriting style, but give it heavy metal aesthetics, and you get this real interesting stuff before they head back into absolutely bludgeoning twin guitar attack take on a Candlemass style doom metal, where he says "fool, fool" and goes "oh no" like Dio. How fucking dank is that? Awesome vocalist, very distinctive personality, but highly drawing on 80s stuff. Let's fast forward a little bit further in the song, see what's going on, huh?
항상 초콜릿처럼 달달하게 지내자.
Here we get an eerie version of the kind of very narratively complex soloing that Lars Johansson and Mike Weed did on the 80s Candlemass albums. A lot more slow burning, although they do get technical at times, like right here. But it's absolutely doom metal, and it's essential for this particular style of epic doom metal to have good lead guitar, and also This little thrash break thing here, drawing on their more death metal-y roots heavily, I would say. Although Candlemass had some kind of mid-paced heavy parts like this, they didn't hit quite as fucking hard as this stuff does. Jesus. The lyrics on this album are actually very interesting, as well as on the follow-up album. Well worth looking up if you have the time. What a biblical, apocalyptic stuff, examined from a very jaded and skeptical viewpoint. If anything, these guys have a more negative view of humanity than Leif from Candlemass did, which is hard to believe given how doomy that motherfucker was. And then we get to their second album from 2019, which, like I said, probably my favorite album last year. Like, it was sort of a sleeper hit. I heard it and I was like, that's pretty cool. And then it just really fucking grew on me. Initially, I didn't like it as much as the first album. Now, it's like, this is one of the best heavy metal albums of the 2000s. On this album, they incorporated a hefty amount of black metal influence. In this song, they're doing a bit of a Bathory-style acoustic guitar throughout the whole thing and various other Bathory guitar techniques. I didn't play any Bathory because if you're listening to this, you don't know what Bathory sounds like.
Get a life. Get alive!
I mean, come on, we all know what Bathory sounds like. And that acoustic guitar bit was absolutely in a Hammerheart mold. But applying that to more Candlemassy doom metal is an interesting combination of styles. Oh wow, look at these spooky choirs. Also rather black metal, in this case Merciful Fate. So a recombination of a lot of influences into a newer, more complex form is the name of the game, as you shall see when we fast forward.
Hey!
Man, there's some more rather Norwegian sounding clean guitar bar chords going on with some very interesting vocals. He really diversified his style. There's this kind of slow burning, atmospheric, emotional crooning crops up on the album. He also utilizes death growls that punctuate the end of phrases in the context of the song. Interesting melding of vocal melodies and guitar. And then this awesome multi-tracked, absolutely emotionally draining, riveting outpouring of grief and hate. But yeah, that little ring right there, very Bathory. And the drums are also doing a much more Bathory and less Candlemass thing on this track. Which makes sense, these guys are all in like black metal bands and death metal bands in their spare time. Oh, yeah. That photo right there, that's the good shit, man. So go out and get both Crypt Sermon albums. They're very easy to acquire because they're both on Dark Descent Records, who have consistently been doing good work since they were established. So thank you, Dark Descent, very much for signing these guys. Thank you, Crypt Sermon, for keeping the flame burning, brother, with this kind of metal. And thank you for listening. Hopefully I'll see you next week.
Well, according to a new Entertainment Weekly poll, 72% of their readers say they would not be offended if a TV show lead character were gay. Though that figure shrinks to 1% when these same readers are reminded that being gay can involve anal sex.